So we're going to kick the day off with a talk from Ruben Gamez, conversation between he and I about his AppSumo deal. Ruben is such a good framework thinker. He's so deliberate with his decisions that, I really wanted him to be part of MicroConf Remote and to talk about how he decided to do an AppSumo deal. We talk about maybe when to think about not doing an AppSumo deal. And then he goes through all the numbers, the revenue, the number of signups, number of support requests. It really wound up being good. I think we will dive in. So let me welcome Ruben Gamez from both BidSketch, and now these days he's focused on DocSketch, his electronic signature app. And let's roll. Ruben Gamez, thank you so much for joining me here today at MicroConf Remote.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
So for folks who don't know, you are a multi-time SaaS founder. You still have BidSketch, which is proposal software. And then DocSketch is what you're working on these days, and that is an electronic signature app. So folks, who have used DocuSign or HelloSign will have a pretty good idea of what DocSketch. Obviously, you have some differentiators from those tools, but that's the gist.
Yep, exactly right.
And you ran an AppSumo deal. When was it?
So I was looking at that. It was May 2019, so almost 2 years.
A couple years ago, yep. And what's been cool is you've been super transparent with a lot of the stuff around that AppSumo deal. And probably most importantly, we're going to cover all the numbers and the ins and outs, but you've been transparent with your thought process of when you should consider what the pros and the cons, and here are things I might do differently. And, you and I spoke on Startups for the Rest of Us about it. And then you've actually given some advice to, some mutual friends that you and I have, some Tiny Seed batchmates as well, when they are considering AppSumo deals, what to think through. And so that's really what we want to capture today is the thought process of, things to think about, what it actually looked like for you. How many signups did you receive in what amount of time? What was the support burn like? How did you handle that? And how much money you made? A lifetime AppSumo deal. So this is your decision process and kind of some things that you think about, and assuming, I know you and I have both done multiple AppSumo deals, I believe. So what are your criteria and what's your thought process around this?
Yeah, I've done 2 with BidSketch and 1 with DocSketch. So I was already pretty comfortable with doing AppSumo deals. There were a few things that I had to think through, and I ended up researching just to make sure that it was the right thing for DocSketch. But AppSumo has changed a lot. So it's much more a community, and there are just certain aspects that are a much bigger deal than they used to be. So nowadays, the main thing that I looked at was, what are we going to get out of it versus what could end up hurting us long term or, be tough for us to deal with long term. Obviously, the money, when I talked to AppSumo, they told me that on average, so this has changed too, you make more money on the AppSumo deals nowadays, which is pretty cool. I guess their list is bigger and they go for a longer period of time. So they said that for us, depends on how much you're charging for the deal. It's pretty standard what you get for each. I think I was 30%, but nowadays they're doing 25% or something like that, and then it can change after that. But it was turned out to be about 20 to 50,000 was the average deal. In
That's
revenue based off, they didn't give me that number in revenue. They just gave me the number in buys, and based off of like what we would be charging in our cut and all that stuff. That's around what I figured. Okay, if we fall in that average, we'll get something like that.
And that is net revenue to you.
Right. Correct.
That total number. Right.
Yep. Then the other thing that we were thinking about was just of course, the reach. They have a really big list. There's a lot of buzz going on when you're doing the deal. A lot of people see the deal, see your product. They try it out. Helps word of mouth, helps other marketing efforts, things like that. Exposure also to other segments. And we have a very horizontal product. So we'd been talking to a lot of different segments in the market. Talked a little bit to real estate, more business offices like accountants, lawyers, things like that. Their deal really just brought everybody from all sorts of industries. So that was really interesting and actually way more useful than I thought it was going to be. So that was one of the good things. The bad and the reason why a lot of people don't want to do the deal, and I wouldn't even say it's bad as long as you're thinking about it the right way, is just life. It's a lifetime deal. They pay once and then that's it. So then support for a lifetime, right? The best way that I've learned to think about that is just to think of those as free users. So if you're okay with having free users or doing a free plan for a short period of time, but keeping those users around, then you'll probably be okay. And that means that there isn't a high cost to support these users. So that's a really big deal. You don't want it to be super high touch, right? You get 3,000 people that you have to onboard, and you have to set up these calls to onboard them properly, or else they're going to have a really bad experience. Ongoing support is really low, so it's not costing you money in some other way. Support, or for every like core action that they take for us, it's sending documents and getting those signed. There is a tiny cost there because we use some third parties to help with that. But it's totally okay because we have a viral component. And that's another thing that could be really useful. If you have a viral component, then the more people use it, that's why a freemium plan works really well for us, the better it is. Even without a free plan, or even without the viral component, like it's still the word of mouth that you can get from that, the buzz and all that stuff can be worth it. So I wouldn't say that it's necessary, but we weighed all that out and just decided that it was a good thing for us to do.
Right. So it sounds like some of your pros are you do get an influx of cash, and for a bootstrapped or mostly bootstrapped company, netting 20 to 50 grand for 4 weeks of work, it can allow you to hire someone. It can allow you to invest in ads or whatever. Right. So there's a benefit there. The exposure both to the AppSumo audience and also to the broader world can bring in, it can give you backlinks for SEO. It can also bring in, in my experience, there were folks who signed up outside of the AppSumo deal during this time that they couldn't attribute, like just the direct traffic went up. I'm not sure if that's still the case these days. Was that your experience?
Didn't really happen for us on DocSketch. We did launch shortly after that. Closed it back down, but definitely less of an effect with BidSketch. That happened.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then, it sounds like in thinking about it, if your app has heavy onboarding at the front, or maybe a long time for people to get value out of it, and they're either expensive to onboard or support, or there's an incremental cost. And of course, I always bring up the example of Drip, where every email we sent was a particular cost, and onboarding, to truly onboard into a marketing automation platform is pretty time intensive. So the Drip would probably have been Drip is marketing automation software, obviously, would have perhaps been a less ideal candidate than DocSketch.
Yep. Yeah. I would have, if I had a product like Drip, it would have been really tough to do a deal, I think, because it's, you have to think of it the same way as doing freemium, right? Like you did freemium, I think, after the acquisition, right?
Yep.
Because there's a lot to it if you're going to do freemium.
It was too expensive to do up front. Cool. So then talk to me about preparing for 800,000 people to check out your deal. How do you even mentally go about that?
Yeah, that was the size of the list at the time, and I know that they trimmed the list and all that stuff. So I don't know, if it's more now, but there's still a lot of people checking out your deal, signing up, looking for support. So one of the things that I did was just research. It was a much bigger list than I'd used to. And so I wanted to get a feel for what the deals were like. And I talked to other founders that had done deals. You introduced me to somebody from Lead Pages who had done a deal. I reached out to people in the AppSumo Slack. They invite you to a Slack so you could just, direct message people. And what I did was just look at SaaS tools that were kind of similar, as similar as they can be to our tool. Because I figured that they might have a more similar experience that they could share. So I learned a lot that way. That was cool. And then I asked the AppSumo team, what are some deals that went really well? They gave me like 3, and I just checked the comments, the reviews, try to figure out what they were doing that was different than the other ones, compared them to the other ones. I found things like they were just more responsive. The answers to the questions and to the feature requests were better. So I just like stole a little bit from, little bit of everything that I just liked. So I was doing the research. The AppSumo community does tend to favor certain things a lot too. Like white labeling is a really big thing for them. And one person told me beforehand too, they open it up for a few days to people, to customers, AppSumo customers that pay for like a special tier or something like that. And one of those people was really useful. She gave me some links to Facebook groups. That was another thing that I did. I joined some Facebook groups of people that like to buy these deals, and there's several of them, and they have a lot of people in there, and they do talk. And when your deal is going on, you want to go be in there answering questions and all that stuff. It's helpful because they do drive a lot of buys.
Yeah. That's not something I would have thought about.
I hired somebody part-time for support because it was going to be a lot of support, and we were still it's super early. We were building out features, in digging up some of the like numbers and all that stuff for this, and looking at some of the comments. There was something that I saw in there that I was like, what, is this right? It was that we were missing like the audit page feature. So we were super basic at that point when we did the deal, and people were like, they don't even have like, blah, 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 this stuff. And I'm like, that can't be right. What's my answer to that? And I was just like, oh, it's coming, blah, blah, I was like, whoa, we didn't even have that. But I was just kind of looking to see, and trying to figure out like, what are some of our answers going to be? So when the time came and I have all these different questions to answer, I'm not trying to think on the spot. You have to do that a little bit, but I'm basically better able to come up with some answers that people like. The first day I told the person not to answer any of the questions, at least for the first part of the day. And what I did was just go in there myself and answered a whole bunch of questions because I didn't really know exactly what they were going to ask. But that helped this person see how I was answering those questions. And then I just told her like, hey, when you feel comfortable and when you see how I'm answering, go ahead and start answering some of those questions. Then I just took a bunch of those questions, put them in a Google Doc, nothing fancy, just copy and paste with my answers, and then did like a really quick like FAQ and added to it. And over the next couple of days after that, she was just able to answer, most of the questions, almost all of them. I still went in there and answered questions myself. So that was one thing. The other thing for the support stuff is that a lot of people worry that they'll do a deal and they'll get support and it'll just be never ending, right? And so you can see here on the you can see here definitely there was a big spike, but then after the deal, like it just goes down, and there's definitely more support after than before. That's because we weren't launched yet before. But it's nothing crazy. It's completely manageable. But it does go back to, I think one of the things that I hadn't, when I've spoken to people before about doing the AppSumo deal, that I hadn't until recently thought too much about was like the mindset part of it. Not until somebody who's thinking about doing the deal sort of brought up as a factor for them. And basically, if you're going to have, if mentally you have a tough time with somebody, let's say 2 years later, still using the product and sending in support, then you're going to have a tough time with this.
Right.
As long as you're thinking,
bother you.
It's going to bother you.
It's going to be a nagging thing of like, you see an AppSumo or you see a support request come in, they're an AppSumo customer by whatever means.
Yep.
And you're saying if that's going to bother you every time you see it, maybe it's not worth doing, right?
Yeah.
Because life's too short.
Yeah. As long as you frame it right, whenever I see that coming in, it's like, okay, these are people who are incentivized to recommend us, they're using the product, they're exposing other people to the product. So I'm totally okay with it, and I don't have a problem with that. right? And again, I think of them as free, same as free users.
Right. And that is something that we didn't call out earlier, but you do have that, or you called it out, but I didn't call it out specifically, is you do have that viral component where your electronic signature, so every person that uses it, whether they're free or not, or only paid once, they are, if they're using it, they're sending out these document requests. And so other people are being exposed, and that can spread the word. And that's another thing.
It's just a way of thinking about it. I know somebody that has a product that's very similar that has a viral component, and they did a deal a while back, and they regret it because they think of it they think of it differently, and it bugs them. Reviews are really important. You start to get reviews on the AppSumo page, and other people look at those to sort of decide whether or not they're going to buy, just like anything, right? And we basically had to help make those reviews better. We had an automation on day 2 for anybody that had an AppSumo coupon that they redeemed in their account. On the second day, we sent out an email that basically just said that we're a small team out of Portland, Oregon. We're excited about them signing up, improving the product for them, and one of the ways they can help make the product better is by helping us grow. And one of the ways that happens is they basically just help us with reviews on AppSumo. So we did that, and that helped move that score up there. We did that for not the entire time, but we did that for a little bit. And I wanted to use, like they're most excited, people that are buying this deal right when they sign up. So I wanted to like use that to also help us on other review sites, not just AppSumo. So like Capterra, G2 Crowd, just changed the link and changed a little bit of the wording after like a few days, and had them sort of like go back and forth between the different sites and contribute reviews there, which has been really helpful for us. The revenue was $41,145 from this, almost 2,800 buys. So 2,799 people bought. And interestingly enough, there were 292 refunds. So the 2,800 number is after the refunds, right?
So it was like 3,100 total buys. Is that right?
Yep.
Or, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's 41,000 is always, for some reason, I always think you made like 32 or 35. I don't know that number in my head.
I thought so too. I've actually said that, but then I dug up the numbers and it was 41,000.
It's 40 grand. I mean,
so
that's not, that's not a bad take for this. And so why do you think, I mean, that's like 10% refunds. Do you know if that's normal?
I think it's kind of normal. I think it's also a little bit high. I think it's normal to see a higher, that's the way that I'd say it. It's normal to see a higher refund rate than what you would normally expect from people who, buy your product, because a lot of people just want to, they'll buy without even really evaluating your product.
Right. They buy, then they log in.
And they think, and so we had a couple of things that were confusing people. Some people thought that we were like a contract generation sort of tool. That, and that was just some of the wording, just seeing the link on our nav that just said contract templates. So some people would go there and like, oh, okay, they offer contracts. And some of the wording on one of the first emails that went out to the AppSumo, which, and on the landing page, we changed that to clarify. So I think that was partly causing that. Also, we were just super early. Right, we didn't have some of the basic features. So, yeah, I think people can expect some refunds, but maybe not this many.
Yep, very cool. And so, I think in conclusion, yay or nay? Like, are you happy? Do you have regrets? You glad you did the deal?
No, it's. I'm really happy that we did the deal. It helped, on several fronts, like a little bit of revenue. It helped on the marketing side, just exposure. Customer development, really we got some big bigger deals that we wouldn't have. I know for sure we wouldn't have gotten if we outside of this, just bigger teams signing up. So it's super useful.
Very cool. I know AppSumo, and again, we're not saying you should do an AppSumo deal, but obviously it worked for you, and we tried to point out some pros and cons of some folks out there maybe shouldn't do it. I know AppSumo is booked out several months because I know a couple other people still also talking to them about deals. But certainly easy enough to reach out to AppSumo if you feel like this, if you're watching this and feel like it's of interest. Ruben, man, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge, dropping the wisdom, and sharing all the numbers. I'm sure there are some folks in the audience here today that'll get a lot of value out of it.
Cool. Happy to share. Thank you.
Thanks again to Ruben for joining us today. And if you have any questions for me about Ruben's AppSumo deal or any of the numbers or thinking through it, you can post it. I'm looking at the MicroConf remote channel over here in Slack. Is it bad that I kind of wanted producer Xander to run that video at 1.5x? Here's what I want to do. I want to do like a virtual summit, and I want to call it the 1.5x summit, because if you're going to have stuff pre-recorded, again, I'm poking a little fun at some of the other summits I've been part of, but if you're going to have it pre-recorded anyways, why not get a little more information per minute? So if there are no questions, then I will torture you with jokes and force you to ask questions. So one joke example: why shouldn't you take a broken spear into a fight? It's pointless. Yep, that's about as good as it gets there, y'all. Can you imagine if one day Microsoft acquired WeWork and named it Microsoft Office? I think Mike may have invented that one. Okay. Oh, look, this is great. We have a question. Someone says, I give up. So Deep asks, are AppSumo deals good for B2C apps too? And yeah, if you look, the cool part is you can go to appsumo.com and you can sift through all the deals. They don't just have one deal. They used to be an exclusive kind of deal a day type thing. But now they have a whole marketplace of them. And you can flip through and their list is it's aspiring entrepreneurs, and it's like Ruben said, it's people who run who are realtors. So like VSMBs, like very small businesses, very small to medium businesses. And so there are folks who, to-do list apps or things that would normally be thought of as kind of really broad B2C that I think can work there. I think if you have a B2C app that's also in a niche, I think that's tougher sell. But the best thing to do is to reach out to AppSumo. Like, they have staff there who can evaluate, and they've been doing this now for, I think the first AppSumo deal it had to be 10 years ago, because I remember it. So Noah Kagan started this, and the first AppSumo deal we listed in our online membership site. At the time, it was called Micropreneur Academy, and I think like 20% or 25% of the purchases came from our listener base, or our membership base, which was really the precursor of MicroConf itself. And so he and I got on the phone early on, and that had to have been, probably a decade ago or so. Justin Kistner asks, are there ways to limit the downside risk of a lifetime subscription? I mean, yes, there are. There's a needle you have to thread here, because you can't just, like the AppSumo, both the AppSumo folks who work there, and we're actually going to hear from Chris in a minute. He works at AppSumo, and he's going to talk us through some of the nuances of this. But there's both the folks who work at AppSumo and also the people who are buying the deals they're pretty savvy, right? And they know, they've seen people try to kind of skirt around it and be like, well, this is the AppSumo plan, and we're not going to add any new features to the AppSumo plan. And that's not going to fly, because you're going to make people mad. Or we're going to like severely limit this, this plan to where the app is almost not usable. So I don't think you want to go down that road. I think the thing to think about is, if you do have any type of viral component, or if you can build that in a powered by link, anything like that, to have into your lower price plans in your AppSumo deal, I think that's a big win. I think if your app by its nature does have a cost with each new person that signs up, that's a pretty tough sell for me. I just don't know that there's a way to work around that. As Ruben said, and as I've heard from a few other folks who've done these deals, is there is a lot of support up front for the month and maybe for a week or two after, and then it really does die down. So unless you feel like A, you're going to cannibalize a lot of your revenue, or B, there's going to be a lot of either ongoing support or cost, I do think this is something that's it can work for a lot of apps that are in that position. Looks like there's one more person typing, and then so I'm going to talk a little bit about, so after, there'll be some, let's see, microspace conversations in pods A and B. Pod A is going to have your most successful marketing campaign. And pod B is share your SaaS, use the screen share function to give a short demo of your product. And so as we wrap up here, there's an optional session with, I'm about to intro him, Chris Sheltzy. And I believe Gennady Batrikov is supposed to join him as well. He's a founder of Blogly. And Chris works for AppSumo, so he's going to have a conversation, behind-the-scenes conversation about AppSumo and how it works, showcase the platform. And that'll be here. It'll stream on YouTube. Even if you don't have the all access, you'll see that in just a minute. Yeah, cool. And then John Galding from Trot.2, he said, there's also a good startup. So the rest of his episode where Rob talked to Ruben about the deal. It's episode 456. And so that's something you can also dig into if you want to hear more. All right. What did users get? Okay, yeah. So there's some questions producer Xander's passing me. What did users get in the deal? Was it for a fixed period of time? So I believe most AppSumo deals now are lifetime deals, and the users got a lifetime, the cheapest pricing tier of DocSketch, I believe is what it was. And then Trevor asks, what percentage of people became active users versus unused accounts? Thinking about services you pay for and how the cost ratio plays out with active, inactive AppSumo users. I don't actually know that number, to be honest. I was tossing this around hypothetically with another founder the other day who's evaluating whether or not to do one. And I was guessing, I was like, I think on the low end, you'll probably get 20 to 30% active. And on the very high end, it feels to me like it's maybe a 60%. Like I can't imagine more than 60, 70% of AppSumo deals actually becoming active. I mean, how many AppSumo deals do I have that I've activated so that the coupon code or whatever, the AppSumo code works and I get it, and then I haven't actually used it. So I know I'm one of those folks who's guilty about that. What is small, too early, or too pre-product market fit for this approach? What is too small, too early? That's a good question for Chris, who's about to come on, to be honest. But in my opinion, yeah, if you don't have some people using it, like if you have 0 users, I would not go to an AppSumo deal because you're going to run into scaling issues really quickly. I would want to be at a minimum in early access, and frankly, they like you to be launched. Like they don't want you to be what's it called? Just under enter your email and get an invite. Like invite, they don't want you in invite only mode to be running with this. So, all right. Cool. Did you allow AppSumo to bid on your branded keywords for ad spend? Also, did you have them no index the deal page? We're launching in April 8th. We're launching April 8th. I don't actually know about that. That's an interesting question. And I think that maybe that's one that you can ask Chris if that's a common thing, because I haven't, the AppSumo deal runs for a matter of weeks, right? It's like 3 or 4 weeks. So I guess they could bid on the branded term during that time, but to me, it's all a negotiation, right? It's saying, hey, I want to include this in the contract, or else figure out what's a deal breaker for you and talk to them about it.